Hello and welcome everyone to episode number 90 at the Indie Football Podcast. Well, I grew up watching a lot of cricket and whenever batters reached 90s, commentators began talking about the nervous 90s for each individual. But for me, I think there is a new term where I can probably say the exciting 90s because I just can't wait to have 10 more brilliant football minds and we complete a century. But okay, that's probably the most cricket I've ever spoken in the opening 30 seconds of this podcast. But today's episode is very special because as I was speaking to our guest today, just before we started recording, Anand Bhai, we started with a lot of Premier League in the initial stages of our podcast. But now we do speak to a lot of people working in Indian football. Of course, you are currently in Bhutan. We'll speak about that more in detail later in this episode. But thank you, Anand Bhai, for taking out the time. How are you feeling today? I know the net is not the best at your place, but we are absolutely happy to still have this time and chat with you.
Yeah. Thank you guys for the warm welcome, and I'm really excited to just share my thoughts, have a good discussion, and just see where it goes, And just to say that I totally agree. It's exciting 90 for you guys. I think you guys have been doing absolutely fantastic job in building that sort of community togetherness in Indian football. I really appreciate it. And then yeah, really excited to start talking about the real sport that is football, not cricket. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Anukar sir, last episode was a Liverpool reporter. This episode is someone who is joining us from Bhutan. And this is something that I've not said. This is something that I've also said before in our podcast. But Anukar sir, we are really turning it global, right?
Absolutely, man. I mean, having someone with such a rich background as Anand, who has worked in a vast plethora of, industries within football itself, and has carved a niche for himself. First of all, a warm welcome from my side to Anand bhai. We are really pleased to have you here. We are starting to get into the nervous 90s, and as Indians we do get a bit nervous around that mark, but when people like you come on board, we always have something to smile about. So yeah, welcome to the Indie Football Podcast. Anand bhai, you have a lot of things which you have done in your career, which we feel really inspired about. Give us a bit of an insight into your career. Like, it has spanned through working at Sudeva FC. You have worked for the Indian women's team, the for the youth level as a performance analyst, and maybe in some other roles also. Give us a bit of a brief intro into that, and do tell us a bit about your life.
So okay, I started out in football like everybody else starts out. We fall in love with the ball and just trying to control the ball when we were like young kids and get exposed to the game. So that's how I started out as well, and played through my school years and university level. Played for some amateur clubs in Karnataka where I was studying, and through that I got my first gig at Kerala United, which were playing I League Second Division back in that season, and that was sort
Okay.
of like an internship and sort of like a short term gig that I did, and through there I got an opportunity to work with the Minerva Academy in Punjab in Chandigarh, and that's how my football journey started. After that, went to Sudeva, of course, like you had mentioned, worked with the I League team, worked with the Duran Cup team, worked with the Delhi League team, and got an opportunity to work with the Indian women's national team and Indian under 17 women's national team. And again, then on went to Kerala Blasters last season, spent last season over there with the reserves
Oh,
team in sort of a dual role as a assistant coach and analyst. And that's after that I've ended up in Bhutan. And it's been a few good months here in Bhutan, and we are settling down. So currently, this is the off season here of the league. So it's the winters. Temperatures get way below freezing. It gets way below freezing temperatures. So we're not having currently league any league matches, but there are a lot of exciting things happening in Bhutanese football and things that we are looking forward to as well. And that I think, in short, is what my journey has been so far.
Just a
Probably the only,
follow.
yeah, Anuka
Huh.
sir, go ahead.
Huh. No, no, please go. I just had a little follow-up question. So, since you're in Bhutan, are you working for a particular club there?
No, I work with the Football Federation, the national team, the Bhutan Football Federation.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. What I was going to mention over here is the only good thing about an off season in the Bhutan football calendar is Anand really taking out the time and joining us here in this podcast. But of course, Anand, when someone we kind of did a bit of our own research when we went through your LinkedIn profile, and your LinkedIn profile
Mhm.
says many things. You are a perform you, and as you mentioned in your opening dialogue here with us, you are a consultant, you are a data analyst, you have done engineering, which is not, you had passed out I think in 2021,
Yep,
right?
that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in all these different roles that you have taken up in, still which very much is a pretty young career in in football,
Hmm.
which one did you enjoy the most, and by enjoying, probably I will narrow it down by asking it to you, which one did you feel that you had the most impact, or your work really contributed towards something significant, and you thought that within football this is something that I should be doing a lot more of?
Okay, okay. Thanks for the question. It's a very interesting one. So yeah, for to answer that, I would say, for me, it's has always about it's always been about the team, and I think both of you will agree with that as well. So if you have the right people around, the right environment around, the right kind of let's say ambitions around by other people, then you automatically get involved in the team much more in trying to do the right things so that the team can succeed. And I think irrespective of any of the roles, this has always been sort of like my dream. Like if I were not a performance analyst, I would have been a, I don't know, a kit manager, or a ball boy even, or something like something in a different role, because I've always wanted to stay close to football. And I think that truly, I think what makes me happy. So I think, if it's the right people around, you always enjoy different roles. But if you ask me what has been the most impact, full role of me being involved in a team, I would say all of them had like different challenges. Every team has its different challenges and different, milestones that you want to achieve with the team, even individually and in a collective. But for me, I think specifically, I would say the role at Kerala Blasters was interesting because it was, first time that I was, put into an sort of like an assistant coach role. But I've done a little bit of coaching before, but I was actively involved in the development of the players who hopefully, would eventually go on to play for the senior team of Blasters, and, hopefully for the national team one day. So I think watching those players develop in a short span of a season, I think is really interesting. How you see them develop on the pitch, and what influence you have on players' lives on and off the pitch. I think that's very interesting on how you try to shape the players, young players, into the kind of, let's say, the player you have in your mind. And I think
Yeah.
that was very, very interesting. So I would say, yeah, that role was interesting.
Yeah, Anuka sir, we all read so much, and of course there is so much of discussion within our community group when it comes to different kinds of managerial styles, coaching styles. But for us, this is a bit of a unexplored territory, with Anand being the assistant coach that he is, coming over and sharing experiences with players and young players, right?
Yeah, it's like a lot of people within a single person. I think that is
Yeah.
something to define Anand, because, like, he has had a number of roles in different
That's a
places.
nice way to say I
Uh,
have BPD.
yeah, but Anand bhai,
Yeah.
now you talked
I'm
about
just kidding.
something which really left me thinking. You talked about the challenges while working for these different teams. Now me and Doipan, we have been running this for 3 years, and like, of course, like with the podcast also, and in the whole sports field as a unit, we have kind of had challenges of our own. I myself feel lucky that I have had the best co-founder to kind of support me with that. But again, like, there are some challenges which you have to go through every day for different things. You have to mitigate them. Now, working with the Indian women's team, we come from a nation which has come up with Chak De for hockey, watching, the Indian hockey women's team, like a movie like that. And, like, there's a lot of folklore around sport and even football for that matter. But of course, we know there are some harsh realities. What was your experience working with the Indian women's team? What do you think? Do you think the challenges which are talked about are kind of compounded in the media? Do you think there's a way to alleviate them? And how do you see we can, kind of they can work for the betterment of the women's game in the country? Because we know at this point the football, when it comes to the women's game, is kind of at a stagnant pace. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I think to answer the first part of your question, I think my experience was amazing, to be really honest. So I joined under Coach Thomas Dinerby, and he is someone with an amazing profile with vast experience. Taken teams to World Cups, taken teams to Olympic Games, and even the players and having, I don't know, like 7, 8 years ago, you would have told if you would have told me, I would get a chance to be in the same team as Baladevi or Ashalata Devi, I wouldn't have probably believed it. But then the way, they welcome everyone, each member of the team, and the way they create that sort of, again, the environment that I spoke about, it was fantastic, right? And to get to the second part of your question, I think almost everybody associated with football will be able to answer that in a proper way. The only way forward is grassroots, and we all know that, right? So the more and more people, uh, you know or kids, we get involved in the game at a younger level, at a younger age, and maybe not just to prepare national players or international players, but then to keep the spirit of the game going, right? So to understand, to make people feel what football teaches us, and the joy we get from it, the togetherness we get from it. I think the moment we are able to increase the pool of players who are picking up the ball and going out to play at a very younger age, we would automatically start getting involved in the game as they grow up, and might not just be players. Could be coaches, could be analysts, could be journalists, could be people involved in the game one way or the other. People who are doing grassroots coaching, people who are doing community coaching, and people like that. So I think that's the way forward. And of course, when you talk about challenges, I think for it's I think it's a general fact that we have to establish that you know uh, sport in India is very difficult, and sport for women in India is extremely difficult. Because it's a lot of, and not just in India, maybe rest of the world, a lot of stigma that they have to go through, and a lot of in terms of the professionalism of the sport, and in terms of how the sport has been picking up in the past few years. I think everything is going on the right track, but like you said, we might not be there where we expected ourselves to be at, but then it's a slow and a long process, and everybody has to be on board about it, and hopefully we can obviously elevate our women footballers to the World Cup standards.
you
And
know before Doipayan asks the next question, I have just one follow-up question here, and that is related to our
Hmm.
podcast, Doi. So just pardon me here, because we had Manisha Kalyan as one of our guests
Hmm.
on
Hmm.
the Indie Football podcast. Now, what's interesting about it is that Manisha's journey is something which is really talked about in the media. She has done an incredible job since she has come in, and like she has played the Champions League, and she is really creating a name. Every time you see her playing for the national team, she is absolutely going past players, scoring goals. Do you think names such as that, and when someone as young as her makes that sort of an impact, it really changes the dynamic for any sport for that matter?
Oh yes, of course. Like look at Neeraj Chopra, for example. Javelin throw. Javelin was never, like a game that was looked upon before Neeraj burst onto the scene. And then that's how it happens. Like you always need that one, like star in your team, in your country that represents the true value of your country. Is a good ambassador. Always constantly performs at the highest level, and a player that people look up to, right? And the kids go like, okay, I want to be that player. I want to be like her. I want to be like him. Whatever. So I think definitely it changes. Adds a lot of optimism and positivity to the dynamic of the country's football, if I can put it that way.
Yeah,
Hmm.
actually, very interesting, Anand bhai. Something that, of course, part of what Anukash had prepared as part of our basic outline and the questions that we had sent to you in the WhatsApp group that we have, is
Mhm.
that how do you really tailor your analysis or your work when you're working with youth teams as compared to working with
Mhm.
senior players? Like, I'm sure your work around performance analysis really surrounds around understanding not only how does a particular player dribble. And actually, I think this is a fine time for me to, and I am a bit of a flaunter when it comes to possessing football books. I have recently
Yeah.
bought a new book called Messi versus Ronaldo.
Mhm.
It is written by a couple of Wall Street journalists who are very famous in terms of the sports industry, Jonathan Clegg and the other person I just forgot his name. So these two actually non-football unsolicited trivia is that these two journalists together have written books on football, on F1, on tennis, on cricket. So I just really love you mentioned journalists, and that is something that came up to my mind. But I have just started that book, and they mentioned about the absolute initial years of Ronaldo when he lived in a place called Madeira in Portugal, which is and they explained how Portugal had those top three clubs, Porto, Benfica, and Sporting Lisbon as the creme de la creme of Portugal, and how different scouts had measured different things when it comes to different age group levels of footballers. So I'm sure this is something which is pretty routine in in your job. So coming back to my question, this was just to get a bit more context to the listeners and viewers who would look at this. Coming back to your question, how different are the parameters or the criterias when you judge youth players as compared to senior players?
Okay, that's again a really nice question. And see, the first thing that involves in performance analysis workflows is the coach that you're associated with, the coach that you're working with, right? And also it depends on the team, or the underage team, or the senior team you're working with, right? So the general context, and it again, it's my understanding, but the general context is when players are younger, we are looking more on the technical side of development, right? Because it's normal for young players to not understand the game tactically as much as the senior pros, and that is also where we are also hoping to develop them more on the technical sides, like receiving the ball correctly or passing the ball correctly, or how to take a first touch, and how to scan before taking a first touch, and what's the difference between when you open up your body outside the box and when you open up your body inside the box. So that is more technical, and I think during underage teams, you are, when I talk about underage teams, I'm talking more of, let's say, under 15s, under 14s, under 13s, but when the teams, when the players go on to, let's say, under 18s, under 20, under 23s, or seniors, the difference is not that much, because the top players
Mm,
of under 18 teams would already be pushing to get into the senior team, right? Will be pushing to get into the starting 11 of the senior teams, the top players of under 20 would definitely get into the squad of the senior team in the coming years of any club or any sort of organization. So the difference is not that huge when it comes to how we divide analysis into technical and tactical and physiological aspects. But then when we talk about like under 15 teams, it's more about technical development rather than focusing on the tactical or the style of play.
all right, interesting.
Yeah, Anukar sir, I remember when it was your last birthday last year. You mentioned Liverpool. Yes, this is from this year, right? So this is just basically something that I had gifted Anukar sir this year. Last year, I remember, and Anukar sir here is a big Liverpool fan, by the way. So we do talk a lot about. Yes, yes, of course. This is one of the books that I'd given him. So.
Last year, yeah.
Anugar sir mentioned about a person called Pep Linders. I hope I pronounced his
Depending,
name
yeah.
right. And he was someone who like kind of did a lot of this, who had assisted Klopp with a lot of the specific performance analysis work. So why I remember this is, Anukar sir, is there something that strikes your mind specifically with what Anand is mentioning and what you have heard
Yeah,
about Liverpool's performance? And I'm sure there's
yeah.
something, so please go for it.
I think that's the telepathy which you develop after 90 episodes, because I was gonna say exactly that. In fact, more than Pep Linders, recently a book came out by Ian Graham. Ian Graham was Liverpool's head of performance and related to data. When And that was something which was introduced around 2013-14, when I think Brendan Rodgers first came in. He was the manager before Klopp. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is, when it initially came in, there was a lot of opposition to data driven in sport, and everyone was like, it will take away the fun of it and all. Now, what we are seeing, that even with the sporting directors Liverpool and other clubs have had, there's a lot of demand for people who are more into data and performance analysis. For example, Michael Edwards is a big name, who, of course, is at now being appointed by FSG, not Liverpool, as per the playbook. But what he does is, he has been very much a nerd, as you would say, into performance analysis, data driven football. Now, that is something which has really started to make a name for itself, and people who are into fields of performance analysis data are being headhunted for big amounts, for millions for that matter. How do you think this performance analysis and getting into data, even for countries like India who are trying to get into the top 100, or even better than that, how do you think that can change the landscape within such countries? And what do you think, how do you think this can help in us as a nation trying to come toe to toe with the major powers? Because definitely we have been seeing a change of trend all over these years. So how do you see this all happening and coming to fruition?
See, Anukash, I totally get your point, and then I totally get where you're coming from. But then again, in my opinion, it's not just, the success of Liverpool after getting a data department or, investing in data is, in my opinion, not just down to data, but also a lot of other things combined together. But having said that, I do not take away the credit. Of course, the influx of data or data science, or influx of data engineering that has come into the sport. Of course, it plays a huge role, because at the top level, the difference between a win or a loss could be very minimal. And a lot of times, score lines don't actually tell you the full story, right? So in terms of that, I think data has come in and given us a lot more and new perspective to the game, I would say. And that has completely in a way changed, how we talk about football or how we talk about sports in general. Like 10 years ago, you would barely, hear the term XG or hear the term, like expected
Excellent.
threats or
Yeah,
like driven crosses or stuff like that. So it
yeah,
has
yeah.
definitely objectified the game more rather than just making it subjective. And of course, the change has, been rapid. It has not been, slow and steady. And because now everybody understands how important it is to have objectivity into the game and try to remove that little bit of, opinion based, let's say, understanding of the game. So I think that has brought in a lot of people on the same page, if I make sense, about how the team play or how the teams should be playing, or how the games went, or how the performances are in the right direction or not in the right direction. So I think in that case, yes, India is a little bit on the weaker side of having people who are good with data and understanding data. But then again, data does not guarantee us wins or medals or everything else, but like a whole holistic development or holistic systematic development of everything around football, which includes the data, will definitely do. And to answer the last part of your question, I think data can play a huge role in scouting, because in my personal opinion, I believe a lot of untapped potential goes like off the charts because we don't have a robust scouting system. And for a country as big as India, you need to we should be having at least a state league, which is like the premier, should be like the premier footballing competition of every state, where the talents have the opportunity to showcase themselves. And that is where we can obviously narrow stuff down. Again, it's very easy for me to come up here and say, should be done, this should be done. Of course, there'll be a lot of challenges on the ground, but in an ideal scenario, I think, when we are able to get all the state leagues and all the data from the state leagues, it will be much easier for us to look at a bigger pool of players and then narrow them down to a specific set of what kind of players the national teams or the clubs are looking for, and then try to work upwards from there.
Yeah. Um Something that comes to my mind after hearing particularly the last 10 minutes that we have spoken about, which is so much in detail about technical analysis and this. I don't think we have anyone's in any of our episodes before this one, we have gone so deep into technical analysis and data recording and all these things. But quite interestingly, I am personally very fascinated by what AI can do in the world of sports, particularly in this entire data analysis, data
Yeah.
crunching segment. And you, Anand Bhai, are in such a hotbed of data analysis and all these things, which, in my opinion, is going to redefine the way football or sports or actually any other industry in terms of how would it operate in the years to come. Do you actually make consolidated efforts to understand more about AI and how best it will assist you with your work?
So I think yes. I think I try to stay updated, but because I'm not a machine learning engineer, but per se, I'm not extremely confident in developing algorithms of my own. So I'm not an expert in that, which obviously I definitely want to upskill and go learn more about it. But then as of now, I think the major change that we have seen is how quickly we can visualize data in terms of when we are using algorithms, when we're using AI based models. And previously, let's say you had to wait like for at least some time before the matches get over to get heat maps of players, right?
Yeah.
But that is again in terms of right now, in terms of technology, in terms of the number of data points that we can extract from a top league game or a top level game, we can have like live heat maps, right? And we can have heat maps at halftime. So of course the sport is always changing, the technology is always evolving, and there's always new influx of new kinds of technology every time in sport across the world. And I think it would not be wise for any one of us, to not stay updated with the advancements of football. So I think AI is going to bring in a little bit of a change in how we work with data, and we work with data collection specifically, and we how we work with data analysis. Like I said, how we can make data-based decisions rapidly, maybe even during the game, coming in the coming years. Maybe coaches would have like, could have like live data coming, being fed to them to make a more conscious decision based on data, and not just what they are seeing. But also data sometimes could be misleading as well. Like we all know, if data is not provided with proper context, proper storyline of what it tells, it can be misleading at times. So yeah, exciting times ahead, I think, with the influx of AI in sport.
Yeah, Anukar sir, one thing that uh, I'll not regret saying this, but might get our podcast labeled as a bit of A-rated content is I remember when Navjot Singh Sidhu in an IPL match once mentioned in like live commentary, he mentioned that data is like a woman wearing bikini. It shows us a lot of things, but I'm only interested in the things that they're not showing me. So I mean, that is the way. And whenever someone speaks of data in football or data in sport, I think this is something that just comes in front of my mind.
Now I understand why whenever I share something new related to Chat GPT or Perplexity, why Doipan gets so happy. Now I understand
Yeah, yes,
the thought process.
yes. But I think as we come to the closing stages of this episode, Anukar sir, this has been one of the most deep dives that we have ever done to in terms of football technical analysis and that sort, right? And if there's any other last question that you want to ask Anand, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, man. I think we got very deep into the whole performance analysis thing. In fact,
Yeah.
I could see the smirk on your face when I was going all in about Ian Graham and Michael Edwards and data and
Yeah.
all. Uh, so before we end this episode, Anand bhai, uh, like if Anand Vardhan wanted to inspire someone today at the end of the podcast by saying something which might get the next Anand Vardhan or get the next big performance analyst out of the country, so that India as a footballing nation, as a sporting nation, could move closer to talking more about data, discussing more about data, and implementing more data. What would you like to say as a parting thought?
I mean, you guys have put me on a pedestal there, but there are a lot of good analysts in and around India right now who've been working abroad as well. There's Joy, there's Prasad, and there are a couple of others who are like, way more experienced as Alvin sir, way more experienced than me, who have been in the circuit for, many years and have more experience than me. But then if I have to say something to an upcoming analyst or a coach or a player, my only suggestion is try not to have an ego, and when you're an analyst, when you're a coach, when you're an assistant coach, a lot of times what happens is you find it difficult to work with different head coaches, because they have their own ideas and you have your own ideas on football. And not every idea is wrong or right, and no idea is absolute, that's going to give you or guarantee you the results. So I think it's very important to be open about taking criticism, open about working hard, and open about sometimes not getting your hard work recognized, and understanding the fact that you are an assistant coach or you're an analyst and you're working for your coach's team, right? It's not your team, it's your coach's team. So not having an ego and being open to learn and being open to adapt, and most importantly, being open to change. You might have been wrong somewhere, but just
Right.
keeping your head down and putting in the hours is most important, I think.
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
I think,
That's beautiful.
yeah, absolutely. I think it has been one of the episodes when probably 20 years down the line, if ever IFP starts its own football club and we begin scouting for performance analyst people, we will just ask them to go through this episode. And this is what we spoke about: performance analysis, do's and don'ts of becoming a performance analyst guy. But thank you very much, Anand Bhai. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you around. We look forward to having a long, sustained relationship with you as we are open. As you mentioned, we have to be open, as we are open to many physical projects around India, or like whatever you think we can possibly contribute with. To all our viewers, thank you for logging in. These are exciting times at the Indie Football Podcast. As I mentioned, we are nearing the triple figure mark. But thanks to people like Anand who absolutely give us the joy in what we want to do, whatever we do. Anukar sir, any last words to cap this extremely educative and knowledgeable episode?
All I want to say is that, and sorry, Anand, but I am sure our audience must have had a lot of Anand after seeing this
Yeah,
episode.
you know, this is
I
exactly what I thought of naming this episode. You know,
yeah.
I'm just trying to put Anand, Mr. Vardhan, बहुत आनंद आया, something like this, and I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah,
But
this is
the reason I didn't say it at the start of the episode is I thought Anand might just run away from us. So yeah, thank you, Anand bhai. It's been a pleasure. We have had a lot of guests over the Indie Football Podcast, and right at the end of every episode, I would say this has been the best episode, and we have loved
yeah,
it. I think every guest brings in their own blend, and this has been a unique experience for us, a learning experience for us. So thank you for coming in. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for yourself initiating the thought to do this episode, because for us we have learned a lot today. Our audience must have learned a lot today, and I hope India as a footballing nation can learn a lot today too. Thank you.
yeah. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Take care.